Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 9, Episode 5. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice and General Partner of Project Voice Capital Partners, and also heavily congested, if you can hear that in my voice. But nothing's going to stop us from the show. We've got a great set of stories, a really important set of stories this week, and a lot of stuff happening, obviously, in this realm of conversational AI, and a great panel to discuss it with. Veena, I'm going to start with you. Excited to have you on the show. Tell us who you are. Tell us who you're with. Tell us what you do.
Thank you, Bradley. I appreciate the opportunity to be with all the others on this show today. I'm Veena Nayak, currently Vice President of Data Strategy and Solutions at the University of Phoenix. I've been with them for 5 years, and I've pretty much led their digital transformation and data strategy innovation in terms of building our data lake in the cloud, building several advanced analytics products, including AI ML solutions for business problems, but also having a very strong emphasis on data governance and data visualization and storytelling. So this is what I do at University of Phoenix. Prior to University of Phoenix, I've spent over 25 years of my career in the supply chain domain. I was with Amazon for a few years leading their selection economics team, which really was a focus on their smaller product selection formats. And then prior to that, with Blue Yonder, building many of their supply chain software solutions. So a career that's been diverse, from supply chain, higher education, and prior to that in banking. In addition, I'm also an industry advisory board member for a company called Kensu. I also am a mentor for AI startups as part of the organization that I'm with, which is Women Leaders in Data and AI. It's a super exciting volunteer work that I do, get to see a lot of AI startup companies, guide them through their go-to-market strategy, but also thinking of how to develop their product. On a personal front, I have been married for almost 30 years. I have 2 kids. They're in college, empty nesters. So I enjoy my time really focusing on learning more about all the new things. There's always something new, as you're going to bring up, Bradley, today, in the space of AI, in the space of this age where we're just going as fast as we can.
For sure. Yeah. So Veena, obviously you're busy. You've been busy for a long time. It's an honor to have you join us on the show.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Stephen Gross. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing well, Bradley. Thank you, for hosting this, and everyone else for being here as well. As Bradley said, my name is Stephen Gross. I am the senior conversation designer at Instacart. So what that kind of entails is just handling pretty much anything conversational AI that we're working on, whether it's chatbots, and pretty much anything generative or conversational AI around that. I like the personal note that Veena gave. I am also a father to one son, and when I'm not doing conversational AI, I am teaching other things how to talk and converse as well. So I guess human conversation as well. So that's a little bit about me.
It's great to have you on the show. Appreciate you joining us. Next up, we have Karan from Speak to IoT. Karan, how are you?
Doing good. And thank you, Bradley, for hosting this, with a wonderful panel out here. So as Bradley mentioned, I'm Karan Sheth. I'm currently the co-founder of a company called Speak to IoT. And as the name suggests, the whole idea is, marrying speaking and the IoT subsystems, right? So anything that you see with an IoT hardware or an IoT system, the whole idea is to actually make it voice conversational interface so that you don't really have to learn how to click or drag your mouses anymore. Essentially just basically creating systems which are completely howless, right? So the systems should intuitively, automatically figure out what they are supposed to do instead of, putting all the burden on us and just freeing up our own cognitive processes. So, that's pretty much what I've been doing for last 5 years. And prior to that, I was working for Cisco Systems. in the Wi-Fi enterprise space. So a lot of learning experience has come from there. And on a personal note, I am father to a 9-year-old daughter who keeps me up and busy and occupied in many different ways. Sometimes this running a startup is much easier than handling a 9-year-old. So, but once again, thank you for having me on the panel.
Yeah, well, I got news for you. You're not going to be any less busy over the next few years. We'll check back with you maybe in another 5 years or so and see how that's going. Karan, thank you for joining us for sure. And Mike, coming to you, tell us who you are, tell us who you're with as well.
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having us this morning here, Bradley. So I am Mike Kneeland. I'm an enterprise transformation subject matter expert who, in simplest terms, I've made a career out of maximizing business outcomes value in the overarching customer experience. So your question is probably like, how do you do that? In simplest terms, I focus on aligning people, process, technology, and data. Sounds pretty easy, right? That's what I made a career out of doing for the better part of the last 20 years. I actually, in parallel to that, co-founded an augmented reality startup here. I'm actually based in Nashville, Tennessee, so not too far from you, Bradley. And so I'm fairly well versed in the space of products and technology design as well. I was their interim head of product and CTO. So I understand kind of both sides of the space, both the people and process side of things, and how technology today has tremendous potential, but it really only delivers the ROI in line with the people and process itself. So you hear the buzzwords about human-centered design or design thinking, human factors. That's really what I focus on. So a major component of that is in the UI UX and total experience space, which is absolutely critical. And like I said, I co-founded that augmented reality company about 5 years ago, and to really learn about the tremendous potential and unlocking that potential within the technology space, but how you really have to hone in on the human factor side of innovation to truly unlock that ROI. So thank you again for having us.
Yeah, no, look, y'all are awesome. Mike, thank you very much for joining us. Honored to have you as well. And with all of that, we'll get to the news. And I'm going to read the headline here for story number 1. This is from the Washington Post. ChatGPT provided better customer service than his staff. He fired them. Let me see here. Oh, is that the right headline? Yeah, it is. Hang on a minute. So I think what happened here. Okay, so I put a different headline in the stories. All right, so that's my confusion. So the headline is ChatGPT provided better customer service than his staff. He fired them. The subhead of it is artificial intelligence is rapidly changing the world of customer service and call centers. Developing economies worry they'll face the brunt. And Veena, I'm coming to you. I'm going to stay in the same order as the introductions. This article covers a lot of ground, and it kind of paints AI in a interesting light. I just want to get your thoughts on what stood out to you from this piece.
It is interesting and it resonates. As a university, we have a pretty large staff of advisors and counselors that work with our students. And we've been asked repeatedly in the last 6 months by our board, by investors and senior leaders, how do we leverage an AI and really just kind of figure out how the partnership's going to look like. And that's how I call it. I mean, to me, over the years, what I know is technology is a partnership with humans so that it makes everything more efficient. So it was very interesting. The article obviously just kind of states the outcome of what they did when they did the AI partnership. However, I think to me, as I have understood our journey and we're dabbling with it, we're building co-pilots for our counselors. The reality is, which is true for any AI solution, garbage in, garbage out. And so I don't know how he had the knowledge base that was being used by his own team of 27 people who were trying to respond to customers apparently not very efficiently, and they weren't being super useful. So clearly, it's something we can do, if there is a strong understanding of the business, a strong data wrangling process to understand how to set up all of that information. Can you use ChatGPT and get rid of your staff? Sure. Would I recommend that? No, because I do think that there is a fine line between having everything that a chatbot can really understand. Keep in mind, ChatGPT has a probabilistic model which can probably come up with some answers that you didn't expect. So I think there is a fine line to have a handshake between that chatbot offering that you may have at your company and what you want to do in terms of a human engagement so that you can find the fine balance of having the best customer experience. Like, I think the article is missing some of the pieces of what went behind the step of bringing a chatbot to firing the 27 people he had.
Well, yes, for sure. I think you made a lot of great comments there, and I want to point something out before I come to you, Stephen. So I understand why I was confused about this article. I've never seen this before. In the data of the article where it puts the headline in the browser, the headline is AI is replacing customer service jobs across the globe. And it just says that very matter-of-factly. Then the actual headline of the piece is ChatGPT provided better customer service than his staff. He fired them. So it really takes it to a whole other tone. I've never seen that before. So I guess that's as much of a commentary on anything about this article as anything else. Veena, I agree. A lot of stuff is left out of this piece. And Stephen, I'm coming to you. It is kind of a prevailing thought that AI, at least for the moment, that AI kind of in a optimal way, it would run by smart management, sits alongside humans rather than replaces them. But clearly that's not everybody's standpoint. Share with us your thoughts on this piece and just this concept in general.
Yeah, so I like there's a part in there about, augmenting their processes, these agent processes and these human processes instead of fully automating them, because, they need humans to really work. And, who better to know your product than these people who are helping others use it every day, day in and day out. So it's like, why would we want to replace those people and, just completely get rid of them when they can kind of help, either train these models or, even kind of pivot to other parts of the business, instead of being reactive in these customer service roles where, they're having issues with XYZ, why not pivot them to maybe more of like a sales role where they can, help get people to sign up for subscriptions, whatever the case may be. So I, kind of disagree with the getting rid of them altogether. It's almost like, where can we use them instead? Because they're, at the end of the day, like, they're still people, and they know your product and they can kind of help, maybe not in this way, in this customer service facing role anymore, but maybe like, where else can they be useful?
Yeah, that's that is, this reshuffling, right, of who's doing what in modern organizations. You nailed it on the head with how you described that. And Karan, I'm coming to you with the same question. Interesting piece from the Washington Post, apparently with multiple different headlines that they decided to use, much to my confusion. What stood out to you from this piece?
Yeah, so the way I see it, right? I mean, so if I look at a particular job, right? I mean, each one of us has a job, and every job entails a whole bunch of different tasks, right? So, but if I pick up one or two tasks which are extremely mundane, or that's just basically making us human beings very inefficient, and if an AI can come and replace that, that's perfectly fine, in my opinion, right? So for example, I was speaking the other day with one of the executives, and their level one queries are commonly about order statuses, right? So something for which, if the volume is really large for a customer service role, just to handle responding to users about their order status, having an AI to handle that is perfectly fine. But if you take that same thing and you can augment it with a human being in place. For an example, let's say, if it's in healthcare, where a prescription has to have a human check in place, you would not want to have something, a task like that completely replaced by an AI, right? So I think the way I see it, right, it is which task is it that we really want to have an AI where it is really useful, and where you absolutely want to have a human being, and I don't think those processes need to go away, or they should ever be replaced, right? And that's what actually stood out for me when I see in an article like this, right? It's quite open, but I think it has to narrow it down to which vertical, which task, and I think that will streamline it further.
It's interesting to note that one of the areas that's been pretty resistant to AI involvement has been where there's humans that businesses haven't wanted to replace just because they feel like they're essential for some reason. Rather, it's because of liability reasons, where if something goes wrong, we want a human to sit there to pin it on, and as we communicate with the outside market, the market needs to know, our customers need to know, our stakeholders, investors, et cetera, need to know that there's a human right there, to where there's a human in the loop for key governance type of decisions. That's been interesting, something I've been keeping an eye on. But your points are well taken. And Mike, I'm coming to you. Same question. Interesting piece from the Washington Post. You've heard some fairly aligned thoughts from the other three panelists on AI kind of sitting alongside labor in modern organizations. Want to get your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you couldn't have teed this up any better. So my response is going to align well with what both Stephen and Karan have just noted, but coming at it from a different perspective, I think. So both of them noted in terms of how this will really take a number of industries to the next level. I think we're going to see automation infiltrate a number of different industries. I think the differentiator will be in what capacity. So I think we have to divide this into front office and back office. And two specific industries, I feel like this is really going to be the case in terms of infiltrating and being effective, is both healthcare and hospitality. So I think there's going to be tremendous opportunity in infiltrating, or AI rather, infiltrating both of these industries. But both industries also really, really leverage the human touch rather heavily. People want that human touch. So I think in the front office side, you're still going to see a lot of high touch interaction. But on the back office side, there's going to be a lot more turnkey automation. So healthcare, for example, patients still want to talk to the doctor, hold the nurse's hand, things like that. But on the back office, let's say, the actual diagnostic piece, who's reading the MRI, like radiology, a lot of that's going to be automated, leveraging the core pillars of AI. So I think the same thing holds true also for hospitality. We will never fully replace that human touch, and people love going on vacation and being able to engage with people who are super friendly and supportive. And I think that piece will still remain. But the components of hospitality that people, such as people hate waiting in line for something. So automating that process, anything related to a queue, I think those components will certainly be automated. So I think it's going to certainly be on a case-by-case basis. Some industries will see more infiltration than others, but a lot of times, more often than not, it's going to be more of a hybrid approach.
Bradley, I would add one more thing. I feel as we're talking about the headline of this article, I think it was deliberately provocative to kind of make people think that there's one or the other. And like we've all said, I think there is a hybrid. And there will be times when you have the human in the loop, and there are times when you have human outside of the loop. The article doesn't do any justice to explaining, how, that actually works. And I think it was intended to be that way, so that some of the awareness that's lacking about what's possible with AI and how's the best way to leverage it is not fully understood. So some of the readers are going to go, oh my God, my job's going to go away. And then there are others who are going to go, great, this looks like a great opportunity for my business to better understand how I can make it more efficient. I mean, in this case, it was a cost play, right? So the owner of that company was really looking for a cost impact versus necessarily a better customer experience. So it definitely would work for another company who's also choosing to have a cost reduction in their business, and maybe it's just for some part of their journey. So I think that the article definitely left a lot to the reader's imagination.
Well, what a big surprise. We've never seen that before. But yeah, so y'all's points are well taken. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute, and I want to linger on this article for a second. So I'm going to sort of present something here, and then I'll open the floor up for y'all to respond. So yeah, right now, this as you said, Veena, this hybrid, this mixed model of human alongside AI and co-pilots and vernacular like that is definitely in vogue. But let's go back a step. And Mike was mentioning hospitality. We've got at least where, in my mind, I think of Alexa as the initial touch point for me with AI. And for many people it was. For me, it definitely was. And Alexa shows up, and for the most part, the prevailing thought about Alexa and voice assistants, Google Assistant and Siri as well, and stuff like that, was, all right, yeah, this is interesting. This can do some things, but this isn't replacing anybody. And even though it did, and one example that I often will cite is that it was the Wynn Hotels, Wynn Resort in Las Vegas, that did a big experiment with Alexa. What they did is they put Echo Dots, I think, if you remember those smaller smart speakers, in every room, and they configured them very specifically for their business to where, and they had a little card with them to where they could answer, and the card prompted people in the room to ask for the top 5 to 10 questions that somebody might call down to the front desk to ask. Well, what did they discover? They discovered that the calls down to the front desk reduced by the equivalent of 2 FTEs. So that's a massive call reduction just for putting those Echo Dots with the little prompting card in the room. And so they were able to reduce some staff. That was one of the very, very first examples, at least since I started paying attention, of AI reducing a workforce or making it more efficient or whatever. Now here comes ChatGPT, which has taken things to the next level, where now we're seeing, okay, you can perhaps replace people, and in many cases that's exactly what people are doing. Although interestingly, again, in hospitality, I just was reading an article. I just gave a talk at a big hospitality restaurant conference a few days ago, and I mentioned an article in this company called Anthony's Wood, I think in wood or coal, Anthony's Coal and Wood Fired Pizza, something like that. I've never been fortunate to have this pizza before, but what they've done is they experimented with voice AI in their not the drive-through, but in their ordering operations, and they ripped it all out. They said this isn't good enough. We're only about humans serving humans around here, and they got a bunch of press for doing that. And I think that was interesting. So where I'm going with this is Alexa comes along, disrupts everything, but can only minimally replace people. ChatGPT comes along, gets significant disruption, significantly more replacing of people. There's going to be something next. And this is what the media never thinks about, and all of us practitioners don't necessarily think about it either. Whatever that next thing is, it's maybe a year away, then the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing. All they're going to do is replace more and more people, which is just going to challenge this notion that hybrid is the ethical outcome, right? I think that's a prevailing thought, is that for our sense of ethics, it needs to be a co-pilot situation, although that may not always be the case. So my question for y'all, the panel, is, do you see the evolution going back from Alexa as sort of this up and to the right, quadratic curve that's just going to continue to get more and more and more accelerated over time? Or do you really think that we are settling into what the steady state is, and that hybrid co-piloting AI alongside humans without that much replacement of humans is the norm moving forward? I'll take anybody's thoughts.
I'll go. I absolutely see it going up. There's just no going back at this point. I think we'll learn along the way, which is what we did when we started with Alexa. Like your examples pointed, there was an application of something that she was able to do that businesses embraced. Could it do it all? Probably not. But as we see ChatGPT in the next generation, I think that there's definitely going to be more efficiency created. Now, whether we land on a absolutely singular pattern, that's probably not something we know yet. But given the different industries, given the different kinds of roles we have, and like Karan said earlier, we do a lot of things today as humans. And as we think of some of these things that we do that are repeatable and scalable, those are easily something that we can hand over to a machine. But there are the way I look at it, it opens up capacity for humans to do more innovation, which means there's more work for machines to catch up. So I don't think that's going to change. That's the way it's supposed to be, is as we create more capacity for us away from mundane or repeatable tasks that you can hand over to someone, you're going to put your energy as a human learning new things, discovering new things, and each of those innovations will lead to more opportunities for someone to come help us, whether it's a machine or another technology.
Yeah,
Well said. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on Veena's point. So I have a similar thought, but actually I think overall I differ in terms of where I think this ultimately will go. So certainly it's no secret that the honeymoon or overarching buzz of ChatGPT has fizzled. I think we somewhat regressed in terms of kind of leveling out in terms of the application. Some particular areas of interest I think still remain, but I think something that is cause for concern long term, that's already been brought up many times recently, is the cost. And it's extremely costly to build out these LLMs, but then also to run them and maintain them going forward. So I think that is going to be a really, really interesting variable going forward. At this point, I think we'll continue to see growth, but we'll also start seeing more and more selection in terms of the application, purely for the cost component alone, because it's purely unsustainable from a dollars and cents standpoint for us to leverage LLMs for things that really are much too costly to do so.
Yeah, well said. Any other thoughts, Stephen or Karan?
Yeah. So I want to actually, turn back the clock and, go back. See, we started off with the technology of clicking pictures, right? Black and white pictures. Then came still movies, no noise, nothing. Then came the color, then 3D, and then now Chat GPT. If you see that entire trend, right, that technological growth, I don't think is ever going to stop. But the question here is, yes, we are trying to recreate the same experience, which you and I can do it so easily through machines. And I think that's where eventually, humans are very, very smart at this, right? Machine, at the end of the day, still whatever Chat GPT or LLM throws out, and I spend all my day doing this, right? It's the context and the meaning to those text with the machine is throwing out, it's happening because of us, right? The meaning to that text is actually coming from us human beings. And I think we will eventually draw that line where we really feel, okay, hey, here's a need where this can be impactful, and here's a list of those verticals and domains where we'll see an absolutely no use to it. And in those areas, it won't actually see much growth. And I think that's how I see it, actually.
Stephen, I'll give you the last word. Any comments or additional thoughts on all this?
Yeah, so I think mine's a bit of an oxymoron, but I'm a conversation designer, so I spend my time building chatbots, but I'm also the type of customer that's like, agent, I'd rather talk to a person, please. So I think that my answer, like it kind of depends. Like I don't, it depends on the user, it depends on what the customer wants and what they feel, they're willing and ready and able to do, like kind of with the hospitality thing. It's like, we could reduce 2 full-time employees, but how many customers are like, I get this thing out of my room, it's listening. I'd rather just go downstairs and ask the person at the front desk. Or, even with the simple queries, like, hey, where's my order? I'd rather just talk to a person so that a human can see the eyes of where it's at, So I think it's just going to kind of depend on the end user's adoption of this AI. So I think I foresee it potentially going up and to the right, but at what rate, how fast is going to kind of be dictated by the users.
Excellent. Yeah, and I am that person who immediately, when I get on a phone, IVR system or whatever, I just start hitting 0. I just immediately start hitting 0, and I don't stop hitting 0. I'll like stop a second. Okay, do I have an agent? No, I'll just resume hitting 0. So yeah, that point's well taken. No, that's great. Great comments on that, and I'm going to move us on to story number 2. This is from Scientific American. The assumptions you bring into conversation with an AI bot influence what it says. And the subhead is, a new study reveals an AI placebo effect. The same chatbot will respond differently depending on its users' assumptions about artificial intelligence. So I'm going to go in the reverse order for this. So Mike, I'm going to start with you. I think that these sort of articles, we saw stuff like this throughout the Alexa era, and now in the ChatGPT era, we're seeing it again, where I'll call them like Rorschach test kind of articles, where there's a lot of different things you could glean from this, and a lot of different directions you can take it. But ultimately, I want to hear all 4 of y'all and how this struck you. So that's my question for you. What'd you think about the piece?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's almost like, there's some degree of sentient being that's factored in here, like they know in advance of, hey, this person doesn't like me, so I'm going to have an attitude. I think that, that certainly is a factor when you think of, cross-generationally. Certain, typically older generations are more against change. They're less likely to embrace, namely innovation or technology. And I think there's going to be a large degree of design that must be factored in here from a UI UX standpoint of making it to where almost like you don't even realize that it is a so-called chatbot, that it's really very human-like. And to your point, the front side of it is, you feel like you're essentially you're pressing 0, right, to where you are talking with someone live. I think that's what's really missing right now from an intelligence standpoint. There's no doubt that these LLMs that are being developed now and are live already today are very much capable of doing a lot, but there's still that human factor, the human touch piece that's missing. And I think that's what really will take these chatbots and, more generally speaking, LLMs to the next level. Namely as it relates to the example presented in this article about how, more senior generations are more against the idea of leveraging chatbots or things like that. It's like when you first talk to the help desk, right? It's like someone's yelling or screaming at you, and by the end, they're like, "Thank you so much." So, really having that human touch to where these LLMs can embrace the anger and sense it and be able to sort of turn the dial, so to speak, as it relates to the overall mood and how to do that, I think is really key.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And Karen, I'm going to ask you the same question here. So you heard Mike talk about just the need for a humanistic side to this technology. Interesting piece. What stood out to you?
Well, so personally, since I have to spend a lot of time creating voice AI, right? In the enterprise space, actually, right? See, one is the personal space where I'm having sort of a dialogue with ChatGPT or one of these LLMs where it's really more personal, and I think that's where the responses kind of really matter. But when you're trying to solve some of these things on the enterprise side of it, right, where it's the accuracy that actually really matters. It's not really the response. You don't want a new response all the time. it's essentially I as an employee, if the AI is created for employees, or we do this a lot for building management system or facility management guys. It's the access to the information, is how fast can I get access to that information, and the decision actually happens much later. So I think it's personal versus enterprise space. And since I'm a bit more focused all the time on the enterprise side of thing, this sort of impact doesn't really happen all the time, because a lot of times LLM, although has taken up a whole lot of footage these days, you sometimes actually don't even need LLMs. You still have to rely on the good old predictive ways of handling with the AIs. And I think that's where the differentiation comes in.
Well, that's a totally different can of worms, right? Is, all of our fixation is on these LLMs, but the reality is there's still other ways to skin a cat, you know what I mean? And I think ultimately we'll come back to some of those. Stephen, I'm coming to you. Interesting piece. You've heard two different sets of comments. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought it was super interesting that it kind of came at this bias, but from the perspective of the user. I think generally we talk about, the bias of the person training these AI models. So it was really interesting to kind of hear this other side of, how the users are interacting with it. I think the key there is really just like, how can these enterprises and how can businesses really like understand their users so that they don't have those biases, or they at least understand these biases when they're going in to train these models, and they're responding in ways that they know that are going to resonate with, with their users, with their customers. So it's not responding with, long big words, or it's using contractions instead of stuff like that. I think just really, how can we understand their biases going into it so we can make it a good experience for them. And I think really like the point that hit it home for me was that this bias wasn't there with these rule-based LLMs. So it's like, is that because they're usually created by humans, kind of like with flow builders and things like that, or like kind of that's really what struck me, was that it wasn't for rule-based LLMs, but more for these generative bots, that this bias kind of sneaks in from users.
Yeah, no, well said. And Veena, I'm going to give you the last word on this piece. You've heard a number of interesting comments across the three other panelists. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think again, I echo a lot of the things that the others have already said, but one of the things that I think I really truly think that is, the AI, there's no magic there, right? So there's information, there's a extrapolation of some of the understanding of that information, and the difference between what you're seeing in a chat GPT like conversation is really the prompts. What are you asking and what are you thinking about? It's almost like human interaction. Like if I imagine Bradley to be a friendly person, I think my interaction with you is typically in a tone and a note, and the type of questions I ask you is different than someone else that I believe truly is going to be unreasonable. So I think there is a little bit of that I think this article talks about. But at the end of the day, I don't think that they can magically, just because I want this chatbot to be friendly, but the information I'm asking is really not intended to be that. I don't think it could change that. So I was a little skeptical of the article, if I could say that. It's just, yes, there's bias, but that bias is there everywhere. And to something that was said earlier, rule-based chatbots or interactions are bound. They're bound by the rules that they have. They don't go out of that. And so there's no opportunity to take away something that wasn't being said, versus in the newer versions of this, where there's a larger data set that's going out, there's an opportunity to put information together. So I want to say that article left me feeling a little, I would just leave it at being skeptical of really what they found. I wouldn't necessarily use that as a reference for anything I would say in the future.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, it's a thought-provoking article. It's like I was saying, these are these Rorschach test type of articles where It just, you hold up a picture and it says, ultimately your thoughts, are reflective of something that you already believed. I think it's interesting to note, one of the things that just makes ChatGPT so interesting in this rise of AI in the mainstream. Obviously, AI has been continuing down its R&D path, relatively quietly, until ChatGPT showed up, and now it's all anybody wants to talk about. But it comes at a time where, we're just very uncomfortable in talking about bias in general. It's not a conversation that comes easily, and especially in large organizations, where the conversation probably doesn't happen at all. And if it does, it's someone trying to, manipulate the conversation. It's a hard and honest conversation to have, because we're all biased in different ways, and the trick of being a human being is it's like anything else. It's living with restraint. It's restraining those feelings, and so figuring out how to reflect that in a conversational AI framework is challenging, and articles like this sort of knock on the door of the essence of the issue. So it's great to hear y'all's thoughts on that, and I appreciate you sharing them. In the interest of time,
Bradley, can I
go ahead.
think, as leaders in the space of AI, and we're all building products, I think it's super, super critical that we keep in mind that we shouldn't be introducing bias, right? That's part of AI ethics. And I think there's a difference there versus what the article talks about, the interaction creating bias. So I think there are two things. The foundation of building any solution, to the extent that you can, you have to make sure you're ethical and not creating a bias, because the outcome of that model is going to be used in ways that you don't know may change the impact of many different people's lives and behaviors. So I think it's important that we keep in mind that what we're saying is, when we build these solutions for our customers, we are going to do what we can to remove as much of the bias that can be introduced in the data that we have. So
Yeah.
I just put that out there.
No, that's great, and that's a great place to leave that. I'm going to go to story number 3, which I had to include this because this harkens back to many. I think probably every season of this show we've had some story like this. This is from the Daily Mail. I'm called Siri, and I've had to change my name to stop iPhones pinging every time someone says my name. And it says Siri Price, 26 years old, said she has been left, quote, absolutely fuming after latest Apple update. So I will state for the record that a couple of years ago at Project Voice's annual conference, we had the team for the Washington Post speak at the conference. A woman named Alexa wrote the seminal piece about how Amazon naming Alexa has messed up the lives of women named Alexa, if you could follow all of that. And and some legitimate points have been made about that. And if you look at what has happened since Amazon named Alexa, human beings do not name their progeny Alexa anymore. It basically took a big eraser to anybody naming their daughter Alexa, almost instantly, at least here in the United States, according to census data. So with all that being said, I'm going to go in the original order. So Veena, I'm going to start with you, Stephen, Karan, and then Mike, I'll end with you. Interesting piece here. I have a lot of exposure to this over 9 seasons of the show, but y'all may have less. Does this woman have a legitimate argument, or do you feel sympathy? Do you feel laughter? Do you feel how does this article and this story strike you?
I'll be very honest, I took about 2 minutes. I was completely put off by all the pictures, and it looked like a publicity stunt to me. I wouldn't have read that article if you hadn't sent it. Having said that, I think I want to empathize with a challenge that, is you have a name that may cause confusion with an AI assistant on a phone. So I empathize with maybe the challenges she has. I do think that in the article, or perhaps maybe her representation of how disruptive it's to her life, was a little bit over the top. I don't think my phone rings, or even if I said Siri now 5 times, my phone's not doing anything, even though I have an iPhone. So I had to take it with a grain of salt, but I'll just leave it at that. I kind of just looked at it, and I didn't think the article did a good job necessarily, distracting, us with all the other things they had on that page.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a separate issue of, you have to you have to wade through a lot these days to get to an actual article, separate subject. Stephen, I'm coming to you. Same question. What emotions or response does this article evoke for you? More empathy, more questioning, like what is this? Like share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think empathy for sure, because my wife has a friend named Alexa, and so we went through that, whole experience with, talking to her, and she said, "Oh, don't say my name around it," which actually we found out because we had one of those Echo Dots that we were talking about from the hotel, and you can change the name on it from Alexa to Echo. So it's something where it's like, could Siri explore that? But then on the other side, did this girl have to change her name, just because of this, or could she have just gone by the nickname? Does she have to go through all the trouble? Because I'm imagining it's not easy to go legally change your name, for something like this. So I think, there's a lot of questioning, but there's also some entertainment there for sure.
So it should be noted that the people who are very upset about Alexa being named Alexa are not at all satisfied with the fact that you can change the wake word from Alexa to Echo to computer is another one, like Star Trek, and then they added like Ziggy Stardust or something, like Ziggy, I think is what it is, or something like that. Some incredibly weird one they've added as well. That's not acceptable. And the reason, if you listen to their arguments, the incredible marketing campaign that Amazon does never mentions any of these other words. So for most people, it's like that doesn't exist. So it's interesting to note that, and also I do agree with you, and also Veena, I think you would share this perspective as well. It's like, this is a 26-year-old woman here. Like, part of what the Washington Post presented is like younger girls, 5 to 15 years old, perhaps in that range, getting bullied, boys at school saying, Alexa, do something for me, or Alexa, do this. You know what I mean? Like, that's a different dynamic for children. But again, this is a 26-year-old woman. So interesting to note that as well. Karan, I want to come to you. You've heard a bunch at this point. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I do empathize with her, actually. So here's a funny fact, right? Every time someone calls my name, or even if you have to type in, it autocorrects, changes it to Karen. And I've been facing this for pretty much, I mean, on both sides of the world. I live in India, and still it doesn't really matter. If an Indian calls me, it will mess it up to Karen, right? And by this time now I'm used to it. Now, will I go and change my name to something else? No, I would not do that. And I take it as a humor, right? Okay, yep, we are all fault. There's nothing perfect over here. And and then I think I have accepted that by now. But yes, I can totally see and relate if someone is named Alexa in school, and how they can easily get bullied by it, where someone would say, "Hey Alexa, tell me the weather," when you and the entire class can just gang up on that kid, right? So we have to be a little more responsible on what we name it. And definitely, if I have another kid, will I name her Alexa? No, I would certainly not do that. So I mean, that's my take, on this particular piece.
Well, it's interesting just to hear you ruminate on that. I mean, that is one of the things that when I was interviewing the Washington Post at the conference, what I've been talking about, as they were talking about Alexa and the ethics of all of that. It's interesting to note, plenty of people in this world
Yeah, well, this is the article you always want to go last on because it's so easy. Going back to Veena's point, this is certainly one of the more diva articles that I've read this quarter. I will say it's a fairly easy response. This is simply put, it's a design issue. And you touched on it briefly, Bradley. Amazon's somewhat already gotten there, so they make it to where you can interchange whatever that command prompt is, whether it's Alexa or Echo. I think it's just a matter of taking that a step further. You don't want to give too many options. As I like to say, that's the Cheesecake Factory menu option. You don't want that model. It's too many options, but you want more of the In-N-Out Burger model where you give people like 3 to 5 options, right? And I think that's what we really need to do here is you give people, 5 to 7 options and you call it a day. I think that would appease most people. I understand the points that have been made about bullying and things of that sort. But giving people, that's a very easy design fix. You literally, make it the text editable, and you have a new command, and voila, problem solved.
What's the design fix for someone looking for media attention?
That sounds like an internal culture issue. That's what that sounds like.
Thanks to all of y'all. Great conversation. Just a fantastic set of commentary around a lot of interesting articles coming out this week. Veena, Stephen, Karan, Mike, thank all of y'all for sharing your perspective with not just me, but the audience as well. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks for having us.
Bradley.
You got it. For This Week in Voice, Season 9, Episode 5. Thank you for listening, if you're listening on Apple or your podcast provider of choice, or for watching, if you're watching us on YouTube. Until next time.